Hi there, we're glad you're here. I am joined with some prevention colleagues to give you some information about some prevention principles that are really going to help anyone who is involved in a drug prevention coalition. My name is Stephanie Simeon. I use the she, her pronouns, and I help lead the prevention coalition that is in Medway, Massachusetts. I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Victoria.
Hello, my name is Victoria. I also use the she, her pronouns, and I am the prevention coordinator for the Medfield Cares About Prevention, or MCAP Coalition, and I am going to hand it over to Zoe.
Hi, I'm Zoe Morrow. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm the coordinator for the Holliston Drug and Alcohol Awareness Coalition, which we call HDAC. And I'm going to kick us off. So let's talk about what prevention is. So understanding prevention and coalitions. As we mentioned, all of us work for local Massachusetts coalitions, specifically ones that work with substance misuse, which is a proactive process that aims to reduce the impact of substance misuse and mental disorders. Prevention activities work to educate and support individuals and communities to prevent use and misuse of drugs and the development of substance use disorders. A prevention coalition is a collective of groups of individuals, organizations, and systems all coming together to work towards substance misuse prevention. This includes law enforcement, schools, parents, youth, businesses, volunteer groups, healthcare professionals, media, religious organizations, government, youth serving organizations, substance use organizations, the recovery community, and more. So we have those 4 guiding principles that we're going to talk about, and this is the first one. So the upstream approach, which we'll start off by showing a video.
Imagine this. You're walking along a river and see a child flailing in the water. Without a second thought, you jump in, grab them, and get to shore. Just as you settle on shore with the child you rescued, another child is in the river and needs rescuing. Of course, you jump in to save that child as well. But then there's another, and another. While you're busy trying to save all the children, at some point the thought crosses your mind, why are all these children in the river? Good question. You go upstream to figure that out. By going upstream, you learn that along the river's edge, there are no protective barriers. And while some children keep away from the edge, others get close. And some get so close they fall in. Some manage to swim to shore, but others struggle against the current and are swept downstream. You're exhausted. Rather than continuing to yank children out of the river one by one, wouldn't it make more sense to shore up that dangerous edge? Put in a protective barrier that prevents children from falling in the water in the first place. This is the upstream parable. We're creating a community of support and providing tools to build those protective factors to help prevent children from falling into that river in the first place. Rather than exhausting all resources, pulling kids out of dangerous situations, we can work together to give them the tools to avoid those situations. Getting upstream means reaching kids earlier and more often. Using active learning techniques and community engagement, we're able to build protective barriers to keep kids safe from the dangers of exploitation. Because upstream is the dream.
All right, so the upstream approach is a strategy a lot of us use in our towns, across Massachusetts, and across the nation to connect and educate young people before they fall into addiction. This is also known as primary prevention, which is really just tackling the problem before it starts. Another thing this video mentions is those barriers around the stream, which they call protective factors. In addition to substance education, we also put lots of effort into supporting and building protective factors, some of which we're going to talk about later.
Imagine.
Thank you so much, Zoe. So we have another prevention principle that we want to share with you. This is called the health impact pyramid, and I want to explain a few things that you're seeing on this screen. The first thing that's important to know is that this health impact pyramid was adapted to give examples that are specific to treating and addressing the concerns of alcohol. The other thing that I really want to point out is that all of the examples, all of the different things listed within this pyramid are all potentially good things to do. Hopefully, all of them have some impact and can help individuals, at least one person, right? But the real gist and what we really wanted to show this for is understanding how there's lots of different options that a coalition or a group of concerned people can do. And a lot of times when we're in this prevention world, resources might be limited. So you really want to think a little bit critically about how do you strategically plan initiatives that are going to help as many people in your community as possible. So that's why there are essentially little indications on either side. On the left-hand side of this pyramid, we have what they're indicating as the higher you are on the pyramid, the smaller the impact. And that's in the terms of number of people. So the things at the very base of the pyramid, in theory, would most likely impact the largest amount of people. We also have on the right-hand side, though, understanding that there's sort of an inverse that of amount of effort it would likely take, it particularly for those who are decision makers in the community, on how likely you are to actually get that initiative put into place and implemented. So again, just for example, like at the very top of the pyramid, the different initiatives in there are actually addressing each individual person one at a time. So doing education or one-on-one counseling in again, one person at a time. So it takes a lot of resource to reach each individual person. It's still a great thing to do. People certainly still need one-on-one counseling, but you are putting time and effort into helping that one person. As opposed to all the way at the bottom of the pyramid, we have really bigger initiatives that are policies that will change the whole community that you're addressing, could even change a whole country, essentially, right? But as you can imagine, that is going to take a lot of time and effort and advocacy to actually put into place some of those policies and things at the very base of the pyramid, but those things are going to make a huge impact and sustain. So a lot of times coalition efforts can be essentially in the middle here. There is one certain section highlighted, not particular on purpose, but I think the person who made this had that one highlighted. I will just point out that something like that coalitions could advocate for is removing dangerous products from their community. They can try to bring attention to that and try to work with either retailers or people who make policy. I will point out that AED actually in this case stands for alcohol energy drinks. So energy drinks that also have alcohol in them are particularly items of concern in this topic of drug prevention. So again, there might be other things a little bit higher, but generally we want to try as much as we can to make an impact among as many community members as possible. So a lot of times we're doing a mixture of course, education along with some other efforts that have a wider impact.
Thank you so much. And the third principle that we're going to talk about is the strategic prevention framework. And first, we're just going to watch a brief video that explains this.
The Strategic Prevention Framework, or SPIF, is built on a community-based risk and protective factors approach to prevention with a series of guiding principles that can be utilized at the federal, state, tribal, and community levels. There are 7 phases of the SPIF: assessment, capacity, planning, implementation, evaluation, cultural competence, and sustainability. Cultural competence and sustainability are at the center of every phase of the SPIF and should be considered in each aspect. The first phase of the SPIF is assessment. The SPIF is a data-driven process that answers the question, what is going on in my community? We want to assess profile and population needs, resources, and readiness to address needs and gaps. We want to assess prevention needs based on epidemiological data. And culturally, we want to make sure that we assure that the data is culturally responsive and appropriate. The next phase is capacity. Capacity is the ability to mobilize stakeholders and resources to address the needs of a community. Building prevention capacity is all about taking a look at personnel, knowledge, and skills, as well as community and organizational resources and readiness. In essence, capacity equals resources plus readiness. With regards to cultural competency, we want to make sure that we examine community resources and readiness and check cultural representation. The next phase is planning. In this phase, we want to develop a comprehensive plan which includes strategic goals, objectives, logic models, and action plans. When developing logic models and action plans, it is essential to determine who may be missing from the process and to make every effort to ensure that the plan is culturally inclusive. The next phase is implementation. In this phase, we want to implement evidence-based programs, policies, practices, and strategies. And what we want to remember about cultural competency at this phase is that interventions that are effective and appropriate for the community ensure that all stakeholders and community partners are involved and on the same page, and cultural adaptations are made as needed. Evaluation. In the evaluation phase, we want to measure the impact of the intervention and its outcomes. In this phase, we monitor, evaluate, sustain, and improve or replace those things that aren't working. The purpose of evaluation is to look for areas of improvement. With respect to cultural competence, it is important to make sure that the community is involved in all aspects of the evaluation process. Cultural competence. We want to consider cultural, gender, ability levels, and sexual orientation in all aspects of the SPIF. The reason why we do this is to eliminate service and participation disparities for people of diverse racial, ethnic, and linguistic populations. Each step of the SPIF requires and greatly benefits from the participation of diverse community partners. Sustainability. In this phase of the SPIF, we want to identify the outcomes that were achieved and consider what exactly do we want to sustain. Do we want to sustain the prevention infrastructure, partnerships, collaborations, effective policies, programs, or practices? It's important to remember that the individuals and institutions you involve will change as your initiative evolves over time, but the need for prevention partners will remain constant. Culturally, we want to remember that the levels of partnership that are most culturally relevant to the community. We want to remember that valuing diversity and awareness and acceptance of differences throughout the SPIF is really important in the sustainability phase. In conclusion, the SPIF is designed to help practitioners gather and use data to guide all prevention decisions. Communities may also engage in activities related to multiple steps simultaneously as their needs evolve. Earlier prevention models often measured success by looking at an individual's program outcomes or changes among small groups. But effective prevention means implementing multiple strategies that address risk and protective factors associated with the problems or issues in a given community. In this way, we are much more likely to create an environment that helps people support healthy decision-making. And that's the SPIF. The Strategic Prevention Framework, or SPIF, is...
So I think the video did a great job at explaining what the SPIF is and why it's so important. And if you can see, the outer edge of this specific diagram is all about equity. And I think that's really important, that this is really what the framework is about establishing equity and making sure that everybody in your community is accounted for and implemented and has a say. And as prevention coordinators of our coalitions, each one of us, Stephanie, Zoe, and myself, this is really central to the work that we do. It's in every aspect of programs and information and things like that. And it's really our main goal is to keep the SPIF in the back of our minds and in the center of our work.
Awesome, thank you. There is one more particular prevention principle that we all agreed is really important for coalition members to be aware of. All the efforts that we do, a lot of times if there's grant funding involved, the grant funders might be looking for a variety of initiatives. And we've learned that these are the 7 strategies that can help with community change that is sustainable if you're addressing multiple things. There are 7 strategies that we're going to go through and actually provide you with real life examples of things that our local coalitions have done in each of these categories to really bring that to life for you. I will say that the first 3 strategies in this list, which is information, skills, and providing support, those first 3 are aimed at really supporting individuals. Then there are additional strategies: reducing access, changing consequences, physical design, and policy change. Those are addressing more of the environment. And again, that's going to really sustain these changes over time. So for an example for providing information, as you can imagine, this is probably what you might initially think about when you think about how do you prevent drug use. We want to educate people. Of course we do, for sure. So one of the initiatives that the Sup Medway Coalition had done is actually a media campaign, which means you're trying to get a message out in lots of different ways and really saturate the community with that message so that it really becomes a norm in that community, which we chose the topic of building bright brains, really trying to focus on the positive and not do any kind of fear tactic sort of efforts, but really give people practical tools, positive actions they can take, which is, helps with being evidence-based on here's how either as a parent I can support my young person with positive brain development, or making sure the young people themselves know of choices that either harm or help them. So giving them the facts, making sure they know that substances can have severe damage to their young developing minds, again, as well as giving people tips for how to really support brain development and give them that success. So we were able to work with and partner with local professionals to do little video clips that we used on social media. We had coalitions create Facebook posts with information about brain development. We also worked locally to have articles and ads in our local newspaper. When there were community events, we would have some coalition members bring alcohol trivia, and we're going to add in some alcohol adolescent brain development trivia in with the prize wheel that really helps engage people, where we're able to give them materials like bookmarks and magnets and things like that that have the Building Bright Brains campaign on them and really help spread that message. Another thing that was really helpful is finding a professional speaker who really aligned well with this whole campaign and the message we're trying to share. This person had a lot of research based on brain development and how risky behavior like drug use really interacts and how parents can do different tips. So we actually had the speaker speak directly to students at school assemblies, as well as having a big parent event where Sup Medway in Medway, Mass, as well as Medfield, who Victoria represents, our 2 communities work together to pull off a really awesome parent event. So that is just an example of ways that a coalition can share information.
So our second strategy is building skills, which HDAC does throughout the year, but one of our highlighted events is our Junior Police Academy training twice a year. So over the summer, we work with our local Youth and Family Service Department and our police department to educate a bunch of middle schoolers about refusal skills and risk and protective factors. And we don't do this by just coming in and lecturing to them. They're a big, energetic group of young people that we really want to get excited about learning some of these things. So we're able to engage with them through games, and they actually practice some of the skills through skits. And sometimes they get prizes for having the best skit or just being a really active group that participates and is respectful. And this is just one example of ways that we're able to help these young people build skills. And we always end it with asking them if they had fun and if they learned something new, and they always did. So the third skill is providing support, which HDAC also was able to do throughout last year with a few different groups at the school specifically. But one of our highlighted events was our partnership with the Middle School Gender and Sexuality Alliance, also known as the GSA. They tagged this as the Crafternoon because we did rock painting and bracelet making. So the coalition brought in the rocks and paint, and then we actually partnered with a local business called Janine's Jewelry, who came in with skills and materials to help the students build bracelets. And this served as a really great space for them to just have like a protective factor in the community and be in a substance-free space, free to be themselves, and maybe just learn something about themselves, maybe talk to us a little bit about substances, but to mostly provide just that positive space. And one of the big things that we wanted to note here was we've noticed from national data, Massachusetts data, that the LGBTQ community is at high risk for substance misuse, which is why we definitely wanted to partner with this club, both at the middle school and hopefully at the high school again next year too.
Thank you. And now we're going to transition more to the environmental aspects or strategies. So the fourth one is enhancing access or reducing barriers. And one example of this was in Medfield, where our coalition, along with our town social service department, Medfield Outreach, we were able to help youth create and implement Medfield Connects. And what this is, it is a health resource fair that happens during a flex period of the school day every spring. And different health-related organizations come from all around the community, and they get to table and kind of say their piece, what they offer, if they have treatment or resources for them, or volunteer opportunities or things like that. So it really gives youth a great way to just come together and see different resources that are available to them in their community. The fifth strategy is changing consequences by incentives or disincentives. Again, in Medfield, one way to do this, we chose to provide incentives for youth to get involved in prevention work. And we hired 5 interns from the Medfield High School to actually work with our office over the summer. You can see them here, all of their little headshots. And they helped facilitate projects such as creating prevention social media posts, designing animation videos for our website, conducting peer key informant interviews, designing positive social norms posters on substance use and mental health, and creating a youth coalition. So being able to provide the incentive of payment really helped them get super involved and excited about this work. And it led to a great outcome and then great partnerships with these youth. Physical design, this is changing or altering physical design. In Medfield, our coalition has partnered with the Medfield Public School System to implement Raising the Bar. And Raising the Bar is an initiative that aims to keep youth events substance-free, and by starting conversations among parents about being positive role models for their children, so not drinking alcohol, using any other sort of substances while at youth events. And we helped change physical design by displaying banners onto every single Medfield Public School athletic field. And we will also be supplementing this by sending letters from school administration, and then our prevention coordinator will speak at a fall athletic night to inform parents of the campaign. Another way was by the sign on the right. says notice, no alcohol or other drugs permitted on school property. So these signs are also placed at every school in Medfield, every public school in Medfield. And again, just reinforcing that these facilities are substance free and working on prevention by altering physical design.
Thank you, Victoria. So the last strategy that is on this list of 7 strategies for community change is regarding policy, advocating for policy or updating regulations, making sure people are educated about the policies as well. It is just important to note, since this is a video for prevention coalitions, definitely be cautious of the difference between advocacy, which is more of education, versus lobbying, which is really putting pressure on decision makers or lawmakers to vote a certain way on a certain bill. That doesn't mean we shouldn't really focus on modifying policies in the sense of really actually advocating, educating, be aware of what is pending for legislation. You can, again, just make people aware of pending laws and they can make their own decisions, as well as just really voicing your concerns about the health of your young people or the health of your residents and loved ones on how substances are impacting the community, how they're impacting, again, young people in the area. So making sure that the decision makers are aware of what's happening locally is a way of really helping in this area. And the example we have is from Medway, Mass, where during our coalition's assessment of our whole community, we were able to find out that fake IDs were being used at a local vape shop, unfortunately. We actually partnered with our retailers. Certainly being in collaboration is important, and we actually worked with the health department as well. They were we were able to give them information that we knew. We were able to do some of the work to find ways to support our local clerks and retailers by finding out what type of training offerings are available. And this department was then able to use the best practices that we guided them to update the tobacco regulations for our town. With that being a success, our work group, who is part of SUP Medway, who looks at policy and does advocacy, we then conducted an environmental scan. So looking at all of the ways that alcohol is showing up, whether it's risky products that might be available in town, to actual advertising that is really exposing, particularly exposing young people, finding out if like places are near schools, like what are our young people seeing and what is the exposure like. That could even include places that you see, litter of alcoholic products in a certain place, right? So looking at how we going to take all of this data and really help prioritize what do we want to advocate for and how can we use that for local change going forward. So that concludes the 7 strategies, as well as all the 4 principles that we wanted to bring to you today. Usually prevention coalitions, we are trying to go upstream. And again, thinking about that health impact pyramid, there are a variety of initiatives that we can take. We certainly want to be doing education, but can we also think about other initiatives that could have a wider impact and hopefully do some good for a lot of our community members. We, of course, are guided every step of the way through the strategic prevention framework. We want to be data driven, and this framework helps us think about what specifically do we need in our town, in our community, and that is a way that's going to guide you all as coalition members, as well as, again, thinking about the variety of initiatives you can do by being guided with the 7 strategies of change. And hopefully our examples of real life examples here in the Medway area gave you some inspiration. We just want to leave you with encouragement. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested and being passionate, particularly for helping people in your community. We hope that this guides you in that work. Thank you so much for everything you are doing and will do.